Hello and welcome to this training course, Organizational Carbon Footprint, or OCF, for companies. I'll be guiding you through this practical journey into understanding, measuring, and managing your company's greenhouse gas emissions. Throughout this course, I'll share not only the theory and international standards you need to know, but also real-world examples and actionable steps you can apply directly in your company. Whether your business is just starting to think about carbon footprint or you're looking to take your sustainability program to the next level, this training is designed to give you clear, practical guidance. If at any point you have questions, want to discuss a specific challenge, or are interested in further training for your team, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find more resources and contact information on my website, sergiarfelis.com, or connect with me on social media. Let's get started and see how your company can turn climate responsibility into a real business opportunity. Now let's take a look at the index for this course. We'll start with an introduction to what the organizational carbon footprint is and why it's so important for businesses today. I'll explain how managing your company's emissions can unlock benefits like cost savings, risk reduction, and improved reputation. Next, we'll dive into the main standards used around the world to measure and report carbon footprints, specifically, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and ISO 14064. We'll break down the three key scopes defined by these standards, so you'll understand exactly what emissions you need to consider. After that, we'll move into a practical exercise where you'll learn how to identify emission sources within your own company. This is a crucial step, because you can't manage what you haven't measured. Once you know where your emissions are coming from, we'll look at how to analyze and interpret your results. I'll show you how to spot emission hotspots and use benchmarking to set realistic, strategic goals. We'll then spend time on strategies for reducing your company's carbon footprint. This includes not only technical solutions but also how to manage change, assign roles and responsibilities, and build a culture of sustainability that engages everyone, from top management to frontline staff. Of course, every company faces challenges along the way, so we'll talk about common barriers to change and how to overcome them with practical, proven solutions. Communication and reporting are also key elements. I'll guide you through how to share your results both internally and externally, ensuring transparency and credibility. Finally, we'll wrap up by summarizing the key lessons and next steps, so you leave this course with a clear action plan. Let's begin our introduction by understanding what OCF actually means and why it's so important for businesses today. The OCF is essentially the total amount of greenhouse gas emissions that a company is responsible for, both directly, like from its own vehicles or boilers, and indirectly, such as from the electricity it uses or the goods and services it buys. This means we're not just looking at what happens inside your company's walls, but also at the broader value chain, including suppliers, logistics, and even how your products are used and disposed of. Why does this matter? Well, there are several powerful reasons. First, international agreements like the Paris Agreement are pushing governments and companies to take real action on climate change. At the same time, customers, investors, and even your own employees are expecting more transparency and responsibility from businesses. Regulations are getting stricter, and companies that can show real progress on carbon reduction are finding it easier to access green financing and attract new business. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine two companies competing for the same client. One can clearly show how it measures and reduces its carbon footprint, while the other can't. Increasingly, clients will choose the company that's actively managing its climate impact, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it reduces risk and demonstrates leadership. By actively managing your OCF, you're not only supporting your company's sustainability goals, you're also making your reporting more transparent, preparing for future regulations, and often discovering new ways to save costs and improve efficiency. Throughout this course, we'll see how you can turn these challenges into opportunities for your business, step by step. On this slide, we're going to talk about the main standards that companies use to measure and report their OCF. This is a crucial step, because if we want our carbon reporting to be credible, consistent, and comparable with others, we need to follow internationally recognized frameworks. The two most widely used standards are the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and the ISO 14064. Let me explain each one with some practical context. The GHG Protocol was developed by the World Resources Institute and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It's the most commonly used framework worldwide, and it provides very detailed guidance for companies. What makes the GHG Protocol especially practical is its classification of emissions into three scopes. Scope 1 covers direct emissions from sources that a company owns or controls, like boilers, company vehicles, or on-site manufacturing. Scope 2 is for indirect emissions from purchased energy, such as the electricity you buy to power your offices or factories. Scope 3 is broader and includes all other indirect emissions that occur in your value chain, like business travel, outsourced production, or even how your products are used and disposed of by customers. This structure helps companies get a complete picture of their climate impact and allows them to benchmark their performance against others in their industry. Now, ISO 14064 is a standard from the International Organization for Standardization. It's also widely recognized, and it's especially valuable for companies that want formal certification or third-party verification of their carbon data. ISO 14064 is divided into 3 parts: one for organizational-level reporting, one for project-level quantification, and one for validation and verification of greenhouse gas information. This standard is more procedural and is often used when a company wants to ensure that its carbon reporting can stand up to external audits or regulatory scrutiny. To make this practical, imagine you're a company that wants to report your emissions to investors or participate in a sustainability ranking. If you use the GHG protocol, you'll have a detailed and widely accepted framework to guide your calculations. If you want to go a step further and get your results certified, ISO 14064 gives you the structure and procedures to make that possible. In summary, both standards are compatible and often used together. The GHG protocol is your go-to for detailed calculation and management, while ISO 14064 is your pathway to certification and external assurance. Throughout this course, we'll focus mainly on the GHG protocol, but the knowledge you gain will be easily transferable if you ever need to work with ISO 14064. Now, let's take a moment to look at the scheme shown on this slide, which visually maps out how greenhouse gas emissions are categorized according to the main standards we've just discussed. What you see here is a breakdown of emissions into 2 big families: direct emissions and indirect emissions. This is a fundamental distinction you'll find in both the GHG protocol and ISO 14064. Direct emissions are those that come straight from sources your company owns or controls. Think of things like fuel burned in your company's boilers, emissions from your own vehicles, or leaks from your air conditioning systems. These are the emissions you have the most direct influence over, and they're grouped under what's called Scope 1. Then, we have indirect emissions, which are a bit more complex. The first category of indirect emissions is from imported electricity. This is Scope 2. It covers the emissions generated by the power plants that produce the electricity you buy and use, even though those emissions don't physically occur at your site. Beyond that, we move into Scope 3, which includes all other indirect emissions that happen up and down your value chain. This can cover a wide range of activities: transportation and logistics, business travel, employee commuting, the goods and services you purchase, waste management, and even how your products are used and disposed of by customers. For example, if your company outsources manufacturing, the emissions from those factories fall under Scope 3. If your employees fly for business trips, those emissions are Scope 3 as well. This scheme helps you systematically identify and categorize every significant source of greenhouse gas emissions connected to your business. It's not just a technical exercise, it's a practical tool for making sure you don't overlook any major sources, and for setting priorities when it comes to reduction efforts. In practice, most companies find that while Scope 1 and 2 are easier to measure and control, Scope 3 often represents the largest share of their total carbon footprint. That's why leading companies are increasingly focusing on engaging suppliers, rethinking logistics, and even redesigning products to address these broader impacts. So, as you look at this scheme, think about your own organization. Where do your biggest sources of emissions likely fall? And which areas could offer the greatest opportunities for meaningful reductions and business value? Put your thoughts in the comment box. Now let's focus specifically on the GHG protocol and how it serves as the backbone for measuring and managing your company's carbon footprint. One of the strengths of the GHG protocol is that it's designed to be practical for companies of any size or sector. Whether you're a manufacturer, a tech company, or a service provider, you can use the same framework to build your emissions inventory. This makes it much easier to compare your results with industry peers or to participate in sustainability rankings and reporting programs. Let's consider a practical example. Imagine you're running a logistics company. The GHG protocol guides you to not only measure the emissions from your own trucks and warehouses but also to consider the emissions from subcontracted carriers, the electricity used in your offices, and even the business travel your employees undertake. This comprehensive approach ensures that nothing important is left out and that your reduction efforts are focused where they'll have the most impact. Finally, the GHG protocol is widely recognized by investors, customers, and regulators. Using it signals that your company is serious about climate action and is following best practices accepted around the world. This can open doors to new business opportunities and partnerships, and it can also make your sustainability claims much more credible. Let's dive into a real-world case study that will help you put theory into practice. Imagine you're part of the sustainability team at a mid-sized tech company called Ecotech Solutions. Your task is to identify all the relevant sources of greenhouse gas emissions across the company's operations, following the GHG protocol's classification into Scope 1, 2, and 3. To make this exercise realistic, let's quickly review the company profile. Ecotech Solutions has its headquarters in a leased office building, owns 2 data centers, employs 150 people, half of whom work remotely and half in the office, operates a fleet of 30 company vehicles, and outsources the manufacturing of its hardware products. Your challenge is to look at each of these activities and ask yourself, which ones generate greenhouse gas emissions, and how should they be classified? Feel free to pause the video and write down your solution in the comments section. This kind of mapping is essential for building a complete carbon inventory. In my experience, companies often overlook sources like refrigerant leaks from air conditioning, or the emissions tied to business travel and remote work, but these can add up quickly, especially in a tech company. As you work through this exercise, don't worry about getting every minor detail perfect. The goal is to understand the process of identifying and classifying emissions, and to start thinking critically about where your company's biggest impacts really are. Once you master this skill, you'll be able to help your own organization build a much more accurate and actionable carbon footprint. In the real world, you will have to be creative to get some of this data. For instance, some companies send surveys to their employees to collect information on their commuting habits. While you calculate OCF emissions year after year, you will be able to see what sources can be neglected and which ones are the most important. Here, you see a table that breaks down the main activities of the company and classifies each one according to the relevant GHG protocol scope, along with the reasoning behind each classification. This exercise demonstrates how a structured approach helps you build a clear and relevant emissions inventory. By focusing first on the most material sources, you ensure your efforts are targeted where they matter most. This is the foundation for effective carbon management and for setting meaningful reduction targets in your company. Now that you've identified and classified your company's emission sources, the next step is to analyze and interpret your results. This is where your data becomes actionable and starts to drive real business value. In the case you were expecting more details about environmental factors and how to use them, you can consult my videos about PCF or LCA where this is explained into more detail. In the sake of not repeating too many concepts, I will skip it here to talk about analyzing and interpreting results. First, you want to focus on identifying emission hotspots. These are the largest sources of emissions in your company, and they often represent the best opportunities for impactful reduction. For example, in a tech company, you might find that your data centers and business travel are your biggest contributors. In a manufacturing company, it could be energy use in production or the materials you purchase. By zeroing in on these hotspots, you can prioritize your efforts where they'll make the most difference. Next, it's important to benchmark your results and use performance indicators. Don't just look at your numbers in isolation. Compare them to previous years, to industry averages, or to similar organizations. Key performance indicators, like emissions per employee or per unit of revenue, can help you track your progress and set realistic targets. For instance, if you see that your emissions per employee are higher than the industry average, that's a signal to investigate further and look for improvement opportunities. Finally, use your analysis to support decision-making. Prioritize actions and investments based on your findings. Target the biggest sources first, but also consider a mix of quick wins and long-term strategies. For example, switching to renewable electricity might be a quick win, while redesigning your supply chain for lower emissions could be a longer-term project. Make sure to engage the relevant departments with tailored information. Finance will want to see cost impacts, operations will need practical steps, and leadership will be interested in strategic alignment. Remember, the goal is not just to collect data, but to use it to drive meaningful change. By systematically analyzing and interpreting your OCF results, you empower your company to make smarter, more sustainable decisions that benefit both your business and the environment. Now we're getting to the heart of the matter: how to actually reduce your company's carbon footprint. As mentioned in previous slide, the key principle here is to focus your efforts where they'll have the biggest impact, both for emissions reduction and for your business. Energy efficiency is a perfect example. Upgrading your HVAC systems or switching to LED lighting not only reduces your Scope 1 and 2 emissions but also lowers your energy bills. Supply chain decarbonization is another major lever, and here's why it's so important. For most companies, Scope 3 emissions, those from your value chain, account for more than 70% of your total carbon footprint. So even if you make your own operations completely carbon neutral, you're still only addressing less than 30% of your impact. This is why engaging suppliers, optimizing logistics, and sourcing low-carbon materials can be game changers. Setting science-based targets gives you a clear roadmap aligned with global climate goals. The Science Based Targets initiative provides a framework that ensures your goals are ambitious enough to contribute to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Technology can be a powerful enabler for carbon reduction, but it's important to deploy it strategically. Digital tools can help you tracking the emissions. Renewable energy help you also reducing OCF, either producing your own green energy or purchasing it. Finally, circular business models can extend the life of your assets and reduce the need for new manufacturing. But here's something many organizations overlook. You need someone dedicated to making all this happen. Establishing a decarbonization role or team within your company is crucial for success. This person or team should handle roadmap execution with timeline-driven project tracking, anticipate and mitigate risks like supply chain disruptions, and most importantly, coordinate across departments. Climate change is fundamentally a multidisciplinary problem that touches finance, operations, procurement, R&D, and marketing. Without someone to bridge these gaps, your efforts can get fragmented and lose momentum. But the most important asset to drive these changes are not technology or energy, it's all about people. And that starts with leadership modeling the behavior you want to see. When CEOs and senior leaders visibly participate in sustainability audits, workshops, and initiatives, it sends a clear message that this is a priority for the organization. Quick wins are essential for building momentum. Launch a 90-day sprint focused on eliminating single-use plastics, optimizing business travel, or reducing energy consumption in offices. These projects show immediate results and get people excited about larger initiatives. Don't forget to tie incentives to emission reduction metrics. When managers' bonuses depend partly on meeting sustainability goals, you'll see real engagement. Training and reskilling employees for green roles creates a win-win situation. Your employees gain valuable skills that make them more marketable, while your company builds internal capacity for sustainability initiatives. Sustainability should be embedded in every operation. Sales teams can use product carbon footprints to differentiate your offerings. Procurement can engage suppliers in reducing their emissions. R&D can design products for circularity and low-emission use. Engineering can optimize processes for energy efficiency. When sustainability becomes part of everyone's job, not just the sustainability teams, that's when you see real transformation. Finally, don't forget about recognition and communication. Companies like Emerson, Nokia, Nestlé, and Bodegas Torres have created supplier awards for the greatest improvements in CO2 emissions. This kind of recognition not only motivates your supply chain but also demonstrates your commitment to stakeholders. Regular third-party audits, following standards like ISO 14064, ensure your progress is credible and transparent. The key takeaway is that successful OCF reduction requires a combination of smart strategy, the right technology, dedicated resources, and most importantly, a culture where everyone understands their role in achieving your climate goals. Let's talk about overcoming challenges and barriers to change, which is a crucial part of any successful carbon management strategy. First, it's important to recognize that barriers are completely normal. Every company, no matter how committed, will face obstacles on the path to reducing its carbon footprint. What sets successful organizations apart is how they respond to these challenges. With strong leadership, clear accountability, and a focus on making steady progress, you can actually turn these challenges into opportunities for sustainable growth. To help you reflect on your own organization's readiness, I encourage you to ask yourself a few key questions. Is the vision and business case for OCF clear to everyone in your company? Are your carbon reduction targets and the responsibilities for collecting and managing data well defined? Have you identified and acted on some quick wins, those early, visible successes that build momentum? Are your change agents, those people driving the initiative, being supported and recognized? And finally, is your supply chain truly engaged and aligned with your goals? Honest answers to these questions will reveal where you might need to focus your efforts next. Now, let's look at some of the most common barriers companies face and practical solutions you can apply. Internal resistance is a big one. Skepticism, fear of change, or lack of buy-in from staff and leaders can stall your progress. The best way to address this is to clearly communicate the business case for OCF, showing how it manages risk, saves money, and enhances reputation. Involve leaders as champions and provide training and support to help everyone adapt. Another barrier is data and measurement gaps. Sometimes emissions data is incomplete, low quality, or scattered across departments. Start with the data you have, and improve it over time. Invest in digital tools to streamline data collection and make sure every department knows who is responsible for what. Financial hurdles are also common, especially concerns about upfront costs for new projects or upgrades. Focus first on projects with a strong return on investment or quick payback. Look for external funding or incentives, and consider using internal carbon pricing to make the business case even stronger. Supply chain complexity can be daunting, especially if your suppliers lack the capacity or motivation to reduce emissions. Share best practices and resources with them. Include CO2 reduction requirements in your contracts, and recognize or reward suppliers who make real progress. Finally, sustaining momentum over time is a challenge for any long-term initiative. Set and celebrate short-term milestones, regularly report progress, and continuously update your strategies as your company and the world around you evolve. By anticipating these barriers and having a clear plan to address them, you'll be much better equipped to keep your OCF program moving forward and deliver real, lasting results. Let's move on to communication and reporting, which are absolutely essential if you want your OCF work to have a real impact both inside and outside your organization. First, let's consider why communication matters. Sharing your OCF results isn't just a box-ticking exercise. It's about building trust, showing accountability, and motivating action across the company. When you clearly explain why OCF matters, and link your results to your business strategy, you make it relevant for everyone, from the boardroom to the shop floor. Internal communication is all about making sure every employee understands the company's goals, progress, and their own role in achieving them. This means using regular updates, like emails, intranet posts, or team meetings, to keep everyone informed. Don't just talk about successes. Share the challenges too. Visual dashboards can be a great way to make progress transparent and keep people engaged. Tailoring your message is key. Executives want to know about strategic impact and risk, employees are looking for practical actions and recognition, and investors care about performance, targets, and compliance. By customizing your communication for each audience, you ensure your message lands where it matters most. Externally, your communication needs to meet regulatory, investor, and customer expectations. Align your reporting with recognized standards like the GHG Protocol, CDP, TCFD, or GRI. Publishing an annual sustainability or climate report is a great way to showcase your achievements and targets, and to enhance your reputation. Now, let's talk about the tools and formats that make your communication effective. Use clear visuals, charts, infographics, and summary tables to make complex information accessible. Offer both detailed and high-level summaries so that everyone, regardless of their background, can understand your results. When it comes to what you should report, there are some key requirements. Organizations need to define both their organizational and operational boundaries. This means specifying which parts of the business and which types of emissions are included. You'll need to quantify emissions using activity data and emission factors. And, importantly, you must be transparent about your methodologies, assumptions, and any limitations. For GHG Protocol, reporting on Scope 1 and 2 is mandatory, while Scope 3 is voluntary but strongly encouraged for a full value chain picture. ISO 14064 places special emphasis on third-party verification, which, while not mandatory, adds a layer of credibility and ensures your documentation is audit-ready. Ensuring credibility is crucial. Transparent, honest reporting builds trust and helps you avoid accusations of greenwashing. Always disclose your methodologies and boundaries, and include third-party verification whenever possible. Finally, remember that communication is not a one-off event. It's a continuous process. Solicit feedback from your stakeholders and update your reports and messaging as your company makes progress. This ongoing dialogue keeps everyone engaged and demonstrates your commitment to continuous improvement. By following these principles, you'll turn your OCF reporting into a powerful tool for engagement, accountability, and real-world impact. Over the course, you have learned how to understand, measure, and manage your company's carbon footprint using internationally recognized standards. Here's a summary of the key takeaways and practical steps you can apply. Why OCF matters. OCF represents the total greenhouse gas emissions for which your company is responsible, both directly and indirectly. Managing OCF is now a business imperative, driven by regulations, stakeholder expectations, and the need to future-proof your company. Effective OCF management enables cost savings, risk reduction, and access to new markets and financing. Standards and frameworks. You have seen that the GHG Protocol and ISO 14064 are the most widely used frameworks for OCF. The GHG Protocol provides detailed guidance, classifying emissions into scopes 1, 2, and 3, while ISO 14064 offers a structured approach and is especially useful for companies seeking certification or third-party verification. Both frameworks are compatible, and knowledge of one is easily transferable to the other. Mapping and classifying emissions. You practiced identifying emission sources within a company, classifying them by scope, and understanding which activities are most material. This step is essential for building a complete and relevant emissions inventory that reflects your company's real impact. Analyzing and interpreting results. You learned how to analyze results by identifying emission hotspots, benchmarking against peers or past performance, and using KPIs to track progress. This analysis is critical for making informed decisions and setting priorities. Strategies for OCF reduction. We explored high-impact reduction levers, from energy efficiency and operational improvements to supply chain engagement and innovation. Setting science-based targets and deploying new technologies are central to achieving meaningful reductions. Implementation requires clear roles, cross-functional coordination, and embedding sustainability into daily operations. Change management and culture. Driving change means overcoming resistance, building internal buy-in, and sustaining momentum. Leadership modeling, incentives, and employee training are crucial. Recognizing and rewarding both internal teams and suppliers accelerates progress and builds a culture of sustainability. Overcoming barriers. Barriers such as data quality, financial constraints, or supply chain complexity are normal. Practical solutions include starting with available data, prioritizing quick wins, seeking external funding, and engaging suppliers through contracts and recognition programs. Communication and reporting. Transparent, regular reporting, internally and externally, is essential. Reports should follow GHG Protocol and ISO 14064 guidance. Define boundaries, disclose methods, and ensure credibility through third-party verification when possible. Tailor your communication to different audiences and use clear visuals to make your results accessible. Final message. Managing your organizational carbon footprint is a journey of continuous improvement. With the right tools, clear leadership, and a culture of engagement, your company can turn climate responsibility into business opportunity. Use what you've learned to drive measurable impact, comply with evolving standards, and lead your sector in sustainability.